Hey everybody, welcome to Performance Anxiety, proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network. I'm your host Mark, and we welcome SoCal punk legend and legitimate scientist Alfie Agnew to the podcast. Alfie spent his youth with his brothers Rick and Frank defining the SoCal punk sound. We talk about that and what it takes to create a new musical landscape. He was a vet by the time he was a junior in high school, but one book changed the entire trajectory of his life. And after decades in academia, writing pieces like A Trace Formula for a Family of Jacobi Matrices, Analysis and Its Applications, he began making music again. And as seems to be the case with Alfie, one night set in motion the fate of his new band, Professor and the Madman, which includes Sean Elliott and Paul Gray and Rat Scabies of The Damned. And they've just released their fourth studio album, and it is diverse. Check it out wherever you find music or on their website, professorandthemadman.com. Follow them on social media. Follow us at Performance ANX. Subscribe, rate, review, and support us at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. There's no commitment, and you can just pick us up a cup of coffee if you like. There's merch at performanceanx.threadless.com. And thanks to AKG for the amazing headphones and the Lyra mic. And now let us enter a world of Alfie Agnew, legitimate professor and musician, here on Performance Anxiety, part of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Alfie Agnew from Professor and the Madman. I'm here on Performance Anxiety. Come check out our album Seance, professorandthemadman.com, or Amazon or Apple or wherever you like to. Give us a chance and check us out. I think you'll dig it. Sounds good.
Awesome. So let me just pull up my notes here because I've got a lot of them. I don't think I took this many notes in school. So
that's great.
So your history, your story is just, it kind of blew me away. And I'd like to start from the beginning. I want to find out about how you got into music in the first place, because I did read how musical your family is.
Yeah.
Did that come from your parents? Did they foster music in the family? Because I know your brothers are also musicians.
Yeah. You know, it is a bit strange. My parents were not into music. They were, mild consumers of music, but they weren't like musicians themselves.
Okay.
My grandfather, my mom's side, actually was a professional drummer. He's actually from Mexico, and he played in a Latin jazz band called the Latinaires. Latin is the her name, but they played in all the TJ jazz clubs like back in the 30s and things like 20s and 30s and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so there is a real. In fact, he's my namesake, or I'm his namesake, and that's a musical connection. But in my parents' generation, there was nobody. So it really started with Rick as the eldest sibling, who was just really into music and was very naturally gifted. And then when each of the male siblings came along anyway, he just sort of like incorporated us into his little family band, so he sort of provided someone for him to play with, and we were kind of into it as well. So, okay. Yeah, usually, like the whole family's musical where the mom and the dad and, the kids follow suit.
Right.
Here, just something that started really with my oldest brother, Rick.
Wow. And so, but by the time you came along, it was kind of assumed you'd be part of the band then.
Oh, yeah. So Rick was really interested in keyboards back in the day. He was into bands like Yes and Rick Wakeman and stuff like that, and Emerson from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And so he was into keyboards and guitar a little bit. And then Frank came along and he put a bass in his hands. And then I came along, he shoved drumsticks in my hands. So we finally had the trio when I was born.
Oh, man, that's awesome. The Agnew Power Trio.
Yep.
So you started off playing drums then?
Yeah, that was my first instrument, and I was really into it, for a while. I played for about 5 years. And then, so we grew up in working class environment. So putting together a drum set when you're in your digits, was a slow process. A birthday would get me a ride cymbal here, maybe Christmas, a crash cymbal, maybe an extra floor tom. So I'd put together a bit of a drum set. slowly, actually it's kind of funny. Like I remember my first ride cymbal was this old thing we got for free that, had like a bite out of it, it was broken, it was kind of broken up. And we put a pool cue in like a paint can and poured cement in it. And that was the cymbal stand. It was brilliant.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And slowly but surely we got sort of real basic equipment. But then when I was kind of in my tweener years, punk rock had kind of hit Orange County in Southern California, and Rick was right at, the center of it. And I borrowed my drum set one time and it never quite came back. I think it got the Keith Moon treatment.
Oh man. Oh, so
I became a guitar player because it was cheap.
You couldn't wait another few years to get another pool cue and cement can. So at what age was this where you really started playing with Rick and playing in bands?
So that was probably on a more serious level, probably my early teenage years. So certainly when we played together in DI back in the kind of early mid 80s, I was probably 14 years old when that started.
Okay.
Yeah. And I had put together some decent equipment and started, my chops were getting quite good by then. And so I could actually play with those guys and hold my own at the very least. I did play in some projects with him actually younger than that.
Okay.
Yeah. There was an early band that no one's ever heard of called Territory that I played in. That was actually as drums. I did some couple of kind of stand-in drumming for a band, a real old OC band called Naughty Women at a rehearsal or two, as well as a band called The Omelets I played a couple times with. Yeah. Robert Omelet, who's an Orange County legend if you look him up. So I did do some stuff, but I was still quite young. I couldn't, it was hard enough to get me into the clubs when I was 14, never mind 8.
Yeah, I can imagine this. No, he's good. He's cool.
Right.
Really? He's got a packet of crayons with him.
Exactly.
Man. All right, so you really actually started on a more professional route in high school.
Yeah.
Right before high school, going into high school.
Absolutely right.
And you were playing with, if I read correctly, the Adolescents.
Yep.
So, all right. Yep. So I do have a question. What am I don't know a whole hell of a lot of punk.
Sure.
So what am I doing if I'm actually doing the Freddie?
1, 2, do the Freddie, do the Freddie, do the Freddie, do the Freddie, do the Freddie. Hide your shoulders, close your eyes, jump around and go that far. Do the Freddie, do the Freddie, do the Freddie, do the Freddie.
Good question. Yeah. So,
because I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So there was a very early OC punk band called Eddie and the Subtitles. And Eddie Joseph was Eddie from Eddie and the Subtitles. And he was a little bit older than even my brother's generation, my older brother's generation. Rick's actually 10 years older than me.
Okay.
So I'm a very little kid mascot hanging out with all these people. And Eddie was older than even Rick's generation. And, there was early bands like the Middle Class and Eddie and the Subtitles. And so the lyrics to Do the Freddie, it actually was really called Do the Eddie. So it's kind of about, it's teasing Eddie Joseph a little bit. And so the hunch your shoulders, bulge your eyes are kind of teasing his looks a little bit.
Okay.
And don't ask why. And he was a maniac. So yeah, that's Do the Eddie actually.
Okay. So the Adolescents, Almost 21, DI, they're all pretty strictly punk bands. You're dealing basically within punk parameters.
Absolutely right.
Okay, but you had a lot more influences than just punk music.
Absolutely. So it's kind of interesting. And this is something that I can't believe I didn't think about earlier on, but I only really thought about it really for interviews from Professor and the Madman and talking to other musicians as well. The scene that's hip and in that you're a part of and that you help create, that's, for most people, that's typically in the teenage years and maybe the 20s.
Yeah.
That's when you're making the music and creating the new stuff. But of course, that's not what you grew up listening to because your scene hasn't been invented yet.
Good point.
so it's kind of like a time thing, because I remember, getting to know Paul Gray and Rat Scabies and talking to those guys. And, I kind of always thought, when I think of them, I thought Punk, The Damned, et cetera. And, but talking to them about bands they grew up listening to, I mean, for Rat, it even goes back to, Sing, Sing, Sing and big band jazz.
Oh, wow.
Not that he was, going to gigs in the 1920s. Like what some of his earliest drum influences were from big band. And you can actually see that on one of his recent solo albums where he covers that Sing, Sing, Sing song.
Okay.
And Paul was mentioning bands like Slade from the early 70s, the Monkees, and it's like, oh yeah, of course. When those guys were just getting into music when they were young, when they were kids, there was no punk.
Yeah.
So it's always kind of the previous generation that becomes the early influences. Then you become teenagers and rebel against it and everything else.
Yeah.
Then you kind of come back full circle once you've mellowed out.
Yeah.
So for me, I grew up listening to a lot of 60s stuff because, I was born in 69, so I wasn't alive for most of it. But I had such strong influences in my older brothers that their influences were really my influences. So 60s, British invasion and stuff was major. And then 70s prog and glam was really big in pre-punk influences. David Bowie, Pink Floyd. T-Rex, absolutely. Those kind of bands and some of the hard rock stuff like early Deep Purple, the Mark II Deep Purple and Zeppelin and all that great stuff, Sabbath. And we had tons of music. Hendrix, we just ate it all up.
Well, and at one point you decided to stop playing music. I guess, like most people, you were trying to balance the two. And most people in bands at that time. Was it a love of academia, or just you got tired of music, or was it anything like that?
All of the above in some sense.
Okay.
I never tired of music, like in terms of listening to music, playing music, writing music. I sort of write music compulsively, always have. Music is like kind of like my religion or my spiritual. That's, when I've had a rough day, I come home and pick up the guitar or sit at the piano, and it makes everything all better. So it's not something I could really walk away from completely. But music as a career or as a business pursuit, so I was doing the DI thing in the mid 80s. I was in DI in adolescence by the late 80s. And I had late in high school, I was never interested in school during my teenage years, most of my teenage years. It was only near the end of high school that I read a book by Albert Einstein, actually, one of the books he wrote, trying to explain relativity to just regular folks like at the time. And I thought, that sounds like a challenge. So I spent the summer before my junior year, or actually it was summer before my senior year, trying to read that. And I understood maybe 20% of it. I mean, I had ignored school so much throughout high school that I didn't have any background. But I thought that it was so psychedelic and bizarre, the ideas, that it got me really intrigued, and it got me in the habit of reading about physics. And it also made me decide to take school a little bit more seriously. Whereas early on, it was everything my dad can do to keep me from dropping out. Now I was like, well, hang on. How do I get into these math and physics classes that I'm not qualified for?
Wow.
And
that's quite a change.
It's a huge change, and I just fell in love with it. And I tend to do that, though. I go headlong into things or not at all. And so, I made up kind of high school within about a year, went to community college, and, decided I was going to go into physics, but I was still doing music at the time. And so I was kind of treading both. Okay. And, DI and adolescents were doing really well by that point, well established. We were touring, and it got to be almost a bit comical. We'd be doing a tour on the West Coast or something, and they'd put me on a train at 3 a.m. to try to make it back for my 8 a.m. exam. Wow. In Fullerton, and it just got to be impossible. I was starting to miss some exams, and, it just became clear that I had to pick one fork of the road, pick one way or the other. And, I had accumulated enough experience about the music business to know that that's probably not I mean, there's nothing wrong with pursuing music as a career, but if you're looking like I was to kind of, hit it big at the rock band or punk band or whatever,
Yeah.
and tour, make records and make a living that way. I mean, you really have to hit it quite big. It's not like most other careers. Well, if you kind of hit average, you'll have a fine life and a fine standard of living, in music, like if you're not top 1%, forget it. You're not, it's going to be a tough life. And I didn't see myself as kind of just backing up people for my whole life or something like that. So I kind of just said, well, I think I'm going to do physics and mathematics instead, and I just went for it.
You don't hear that very. Let's see. Do I want to choose physics and math or punk rock?
Yeah.
So here, okay.
Exactly.
So here's a paragraph you don't hear too often on this podcast, or probably not any. You settled on physics and mathematics as a career and put your musical activities on hold to attend college immediately after high school. Graduated from Cal State Fullerton, completed a PhD in mathematical physics at Oregon State, and did postdoctoral work at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. Afterwards, you became a full professor in math at Cal State Fullerton and also a faculty member in the Gravitational Wave Physics and Astronomy Center. As part of your research activities, you have published a number of technical papers in the field of analysis, differential geometry, general relative theory and cosmology, and the history of mathematics. So this is what's insane to me. I started reading some of these publications, some of these papers and books. Some of these works you've published. I'm going to put it that way. Yeah. And the titles: separable, orthogonally transitive abelian G2 cosmologies, perfect fluid inhomogeneous G2 cosmologies, space-time algebras and twistor theory, progress in analysis, proceedings on the Third International Conference on Analysis, its Applications and Computation, the twistor structure of biquaternionic projective point, advances in applied Clifford algebras. Let's see. And most recently, identifying correlations between LIGO's astronomical range and auxiliary sensors using lasso regression.
Very good.
But my favorite is on the zeros of complex Van Vleck polynomials, because that could be a great album name.
That's true. I like.
I'm surprised it's not like Greta Van Vleck.
Exactly.
Man, that would have been amazing. So if you're looking back on it right now, is math your first love or is music your first love, or are they basically kind of equal?
I couldn't live without either. So in that sense, they're equal. If someone said, you have to give up one or the other from now on, it would break me. I couldn't do it. This is what gets me up in the morning, especially once I got seriously back into music, like writing and recording and playing, live. I mean, once I got back into that around 2012, I couldn't stop. My career was so it had enough momentum, and I jumped all the typical hurdles to where I could afford to do this in the evenings. I didn't have to work day and night anymore.
Right.
I could work during the day and do music at night, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, music was my first love, no doubt about it. I've always had a thing for math, reading, science. I was always good in school and things like that. I, could teach myself a lot of things. So I think that's a natural part of who I am. But it was music first. That was my first love. And
during this time when you put music aside to pursue academics, were you still playing music for yourself? Did you just put it away completely?
I would say I wound it down to about 10% of what I was usually doing. Okay. So there might be a few months where I wouldn't play, an instrument where usually I would play kind of every day, like now and before, So yeah, I mean, working on the science required so much focus, that it wasn't too hard to stay away from the instruments because I was so round the clock absorbed into the other stuff I was doing. And there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through, a lot of exams you have to pass. You have to write papers and create things that no one else has created before, which is not easy. Passing classes is one thing.
Yeah.
Getting something out of nothing is different. I mean, I work in theoretical areas, and so it isn't like I can just sort of run an experiment and report the results, whatever they are.
Right.
In theory, if you sort of working on something and it doesn't work out, it's not worth publishing. It's as good as doing nothing. So it's a little dicier, and so there's a lot of pressure and a lot of time involved. And so, that kept me pretty busy. But I would say there was most certainly something missing in my life.
Yeah, when you're trying to write semi-classical density states for the quantum asymmetrical top, which I don't even know if that's the complete title for that piece, you can't be working on your riffs.
That's right.
So that makes complete sense. So what got you back into playing music? I mean, I understand you had reached the level professionally where you could do it, but what was it that really made you want to actually record and be in a band again?
It was just one of those things, and you just got to always thank the gods for making sure you have friends, because I had moved back to Southern California to take the job at Cal State Fullerton, my alma mater, in 2001. And this is after being out of state for 7 years, and I flew under the radar for about 10 years. Like, even my really good old friends didn't realize I was back in town. I just sort of dropped off the planet when I took off to graduate school. And but Facebook, was around, and so my older brother Rick, who was into social media very early, he's always into things early. He's always a step ahead of everyone, and he's all sent me an email, said, "Hey, Alfie, I want to show you some pictures. I'm going to post them on Facebook." And I'm like, "I don't know what that is. I don't really do that. I want to be contacted, And he's like, "Oh, come on, stop being weird." And so he sent me a link, and, of course I didn't have an account. So I had to make an account, and I wasn't sure what that meant, but I'm like, all right, he's going to hound me until I do it. So, so I made an account and checked out the pictures. Yeah, that was cool, Rick, and all. And then all of a sudden I started getting friend requests, which I didn't know about. I didn't, So this was all new to me back then. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to be a jerk, so I'll, of course I'll accept. And so my old mates from DI, John Bosco Calavero and John Knight, Bosco in particular, he's very social media savvy as well. And he sort of picked up on me being on Facebook, and him and John Knight they were in a band in the 90s called Crash Kills 4. Okay. Kind of a pop punk band, or, that 90s style punk. Yeah. And they played a lot of the old songs that I wrote from Almost 21 as well as some of their own. Really good stuff, actually. And so he got a hold of me and said, "Hey, me and John Knight are in the studio, Pennywise owned studio, friend of theirs, engineer there." And he's all, "Why don't you come down and lay some tracks?" And I'm like, "Oh man, I don't know. It's been a long time." "Oh, nonsense. Just bring your guitar." And I'm all, "Okay, fine. That sounds cool.
Don't be weird."
Exactly. Don't be weird. And so I went down there and, for a couple days recorded some songs, and it, I was pretty rusty, to be honest, but it went really well. And I was just like, it was magical again. And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is great." And they're all, "You want to do the whole album?" And I'm all, "Yep." So we did the whole album together and released it. It's called A Raincoat and Shoes and Pornographic Blues, which is a song I wrote back in Almost 21, but that turned out to be very good for a title. And the album cover painting is actually based on that. So it's very, imagery. Yeah. And then, of course, the natural next progression is, well, hey, how about doing a couple shows? Yeah, all right, cool. Then the cat was out of the bag. People knew I was alive and around. And another old mate from DI named Sean Elliott, who we intersected only a little bit in DI, but he and I had a very intense relationship. We really hit it off well musically. He's really, really talented. Yeah. And he's also someone who's not boxed in very easily. He had a lot of the same influences I had. Okay. He was very eager to do new and different things, as I always was. That's another reason why it wasn't so hard to put down music, back when I first went to college, is because I was really in a lot of side bands trying to sort of expand and draw upon different influences, and rather than just doing the hardcore punk over and over and over and over and over, which I still love to this day and listen to, but I just, you can get really narrow when you're a teenager, and that's awesome, but then at some point you start wanting to see the rest of the world. And not many people were willing to do that except for Sean, And so I had always thought Sean and I should do something, but it was sort of when that started to happen, I hit that fork on the road and took off. Right. So when Sean reached out, when I was in Crash Kills 4, he reached out to have me play actually bass for a project he was doing, a show he was doing. And, we did that, and it was like, we need to make good on that project we never did. Doing some originals, let's just me and you, so there's nobody we have to argue with, or nobody that says, well, what if they don't like it? What if it's not fast enough? What if it's musical? We were just, like we said, no rules. Whatever we want to do, we'll do it. And if people hate it, that's totally cool. Let them hate it. That's fine. But let's please ourselves, Certainly, worked for people like Bowie and Lennon and McCartney, when they started doing their own stuff. Yeah, sure. Maybe they know something, maybe they're wise. And so that's how we got Professor and the Madman together. And then by then, I was just fully back into it.
So it was just the two of you to start with.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. We kind of had the concept. We started writing the tunes. And then shortly after that, Rat became involved through another just funny quirk.
Yeah. Well, no, how did Rat get Rat? So Rat Scabies originally from The Damned.
Yes.
So how did he get involved?
So I remember I mentioned that Sean needed me to play bass for this sort of side band he was doing. It's actually a band called the Crichtons, which goes back to his early days, like junior high school days. Okay. It was mainly like kind of an 80s and punk cover band, before they got into DI and serious bands and things like that. And so they were doing some kind of like reunion shows just locally for friends and stuff. And they needed someone to step in. And that's why he called me. Now, at one of these Crichton shows, it was actually a Christmas party. I love to hear Rat tell it because he just, has such a saucy sense of humor. It was like one of these ugly sweater Christmas party things held, have a private party at this bar that a friend of ours owns. And Rat happened to be there. He was there with a mutual friend, because he was at the time playing with bands like the Mutants, who were based out here in like Joshua Tree, that kind of area. Okay. And so he went there, and of course we covered a couple Damn songs because Sean and I have always been massive Damn fans, and typically do like smash it up for an encore or something. And we knew Rat was there because and so we're like, Rat, and Sean, I'm more shy. Sean, he would ask the Pope to do something crazy. He has no problem with that. So he's like, Rat, we're going to do Smash It Up. How about you come up and play it with us? And Rat, being the gamer he's like, yeah, all right, let's do it. Came up, it went off great. We had a good time. And the next day, again, Sean, being the gutsy guy he is, called that mutual friend and said, hey, Al and I are doing some recording. I have a studio at my house up at Alfie's studio. Rat, you want to come up and lay some tracks down if you're not doing anything today? And he said, yeah, sure, whatever. Wow. So we came up and played, and it was the song Devil's Bargain off our first record, and which has kind of a phantasmagoria feel to it a little bit.
Good evening, sir. Do you have a moment? From your puzzled look, you don't remember me. There was a
figured it's right up his alley, and he really enjoyed it. A lot of the times when he gets asked to play on things, it'll be more punk because that's what he's known for.
Yeah.
But again, like, I mean, he's a musician, and so he would like to do other things too. So I think he was very pleased that we were asking him to do something that almost had a vaudeville feel to it. And he's like, well, what else do you got? And like, we're all, be careful what you ask, because we got a lot.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Yeah, he joined us just in time to make the first album. So he's on the whole first album, and he's been on all of our albums because he enjoyed it. He liked the music, thank goodness, and he just continued to play with us and record the records. How
did you guys come up with the name Professor and the Madman? I know there's a book of the same title. Was there any influence for the book?
Not quite. The book, we knew about the book. There was no doubt about it. In fact, I knew about the book for sure.
Okay.
And it was a couple of things. We thought it was funny, to have a real life professor, and the other guy is, so Sean's actually, very successful as well in real estate.
Okay.
But historically he was quite the crazy man. Always a crazy ride when you were, partying with him in the old days, or on tour, holy cow. And, so he had, the Professor and the Madman thing kind of matched, even though we knew it from the book. It's like, well, hey, it probably applies to us just as well. And we were also playing around with sort of dichotomy things, with like opposites, like Jekyll and Hyde, binary opposites, they call it in philosophy, like things which are really opposites and complementary. So the two of those things together, the appropriateness of the name Professor and the Madman, and the fact that it was capturing something that both of us are philosophically interested in, the good, bad kind of thing. We just felt it fit really well.
I had to go and look it up, and that's because in doing research to talk with you, I've started trying to find some clips and going back and listen to the first three albums, and every time I would pull something up, it was the book or the movie. Like, yeah, man, there's got to be some connection, but kind of figured with you being having the academic background, maybe that was more coincidental, but one of the things that I really enjoyed doing as I was going back was listening to the first three albums, because you guys have released the new album is your fourth album in 4 years.
Yeah. We also released a live album as well.
Wow. So technically 5 albums since 2016.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, no kidding. No, was any of this music, is it all new, or was any of it stuff that you'd been working on in Crash Kills 4, or stuff that you had worked on while you were in academia and just kind of sort of way?
That's an excellent question. The majority of it is new, meaning like since we got together in 2015 to do this project. So most of it is new, especially on Seance. However, some of it, maybe 20% was from old bands or stuff, So for example, the song Machines from Disintegrate Me was actually a song I wrote for DI in the 80s, but I had left. We were working on a new album after Horse Bites, Dog Cries, and the EP. There's an EP that came out after it that with Richard Hung himself, we added some other songs to it and released it. We called it Team Goon, I think. And we were working on a full-length album after that, and I had written a bunch of songs. Rick had written a bunch of songs. But, we parted ways before that album ever happened. And Machines, actually in Nevermore, the song Nevermore, Machines and Nevermore are from that era. So those are, that's real live mid-'80s sort of goth hardcore punk.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so that's another question I have for you. A lot of the lyrics and the song titles have a goth feel to it, or maybe a horror vibe to it. How did you get into that?
in my early and later teen years, I was into bands like like Susie and the Banshees, Bauhaus, Sisters of Mercy. Really loved the Mission UK even into the 90s. And Rick was even into some kind of pre-goth stuff like Virgin Prunes and like some of the real art rock kind of stuff. Residents and so there was some of the weird stuff, but obviously when Rick was in Christian Death, and I absolutely loved that band. I remember going to shows when I was a little kid and just being blown away by the music they were creating, because that was right during when punk was becoming hardcore actually.
Yeah.
And here's a guy dressed in a female wedding dress singing, and Rick's has no distortion on his guitar. He's playing through a jazz chorus doing these weird spacey sounds on the guitar, and it's not super fast, He's energetic, but and it was, they were all painted up like Alice Cooper almost, and so it was, they had this goth thing going, and I just thought it was brilliant. I took to it right away. So I was influenced by that kind of music very early on as well. In fact, even like one of my all-time favorite albums from OC Punk scene is Dance With Me from TSOL.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that had a real goth feel. I mean, the cover is one of the classic goth covers.
Yeah.
The Grim Reaper.
Right. Okay, yeah, I remember that. I'm not super knowledgeable on punk, but I do remember that. I have a lot of friends who are huge into punk, and they'd have like T-shirts with the album cover on it. And
nice. Yeah.
I remember TSOL being big.
Yeah. Oh, big time. And that Dance With Me album was classic. I mean, I won't say much about it, but there's a song called Code Blue was pretty famous for the story content.
Yeah.
Like for example, there's a song on it called Silent Scream, which again, something I loved about TSOL. Right in the midst of hardcore, they have this song Silent Scream, which is kind of like a guitar ballad almost. And the lyrics are pure poetry, goth poetry. I mean, it's something you should really check out. Silent Scream.
I will.
Just fantastic. So yeah, I dug all that, and I think the first Pat M album really, we allowed the sort of goth to be part of that.
I can definitely hear that. I hear so many influences in the first album and the third and fourth. The second is a lot more punk.
Yes, it is. Yeah, almost grungy. It's like punk and grunge, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And it was really cool. I mean, gosh, I got to look up my notes here because there was a couple things I wanted to ask you about. Because you've got the songs in Elixir 2. You've got a song like Cell that's got the classic punk snottiness to it.
Absolutely.
Which is so cool. But immediately after that, you have End of the World, which is like a classic rock guitar sound, like great solo. I mean, it could be like a Firm or Page Plant era Page or Joe Perry or David Gilmour type of solo in it. It's incredible.
That's exactly right. Yep.
It's such a wild transition from one to the other, and you've got songs that combine the two. Like oh God, what the hell is the song? I'm trying to remember the name of this song. Like I said, my notes are a little scattershot all the time. Hence me not exactly being the best student, but you've got here it is, Dearest Foe.
Yeah,
that song. It's got, somehow you managed to put punk and classic rock in the same song. Two things that were completely against each other back in the 70s and the 80s, and somehow you guys managed to put them both in the same song and make it work. Yeah, absolutely. That's something, I mean, we don't look
to do it in a contrived way, but that's exactly the things that are happening. One review of Seance called it prog punk, which you would think there's no such a thing. That's
right.
an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you get a couple of crazy songwriters that have immersed themselves in 4 decades worth of great music. At some point you kind of grow up and if you let yourself, you will naturally start blending those influences. It's just unfortunately most people like to define themselves by a genre and refuse to go out of it, which is just tragic in my opinion. But hey, to each his own. Yeah,
I agree with you 100%. I used to, when I was in high school, I hated pop music. I was not into pop music at all. I graduated high school in 91. So at that time, my guilty pleasure, the one thing that I would listen to that I couldn't let anybody know back at the time was Hall & Oates. Loved Hall & Oates.
They're great.
Yeah. But if anybody in my school, I grew up in New Jersey, and anybody, I was a metalhead. So anybody,
pay for that.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna get a swirly or something. But at this point, I've been lucky enough to talk to some amazing people like yourself, and I've been able to listen with more open-mindedness and more open ears, and I've really started enjoying things that I didn't as a kid. So I agree with you 100% that you really got to let yourself be open to different things and not pigeonhole yourself.
That's right. That's right. And I feel a little bit lucky that because again, my sort of defining genre when I was a teenager, the thing that I helped to develop was punk. And I had the good fortune of being involved in the very early punk scene, even though I was so young, because of my older brothers, in particular, Rick. And both my other older brothers are the real cool kind of older brothers that, the little brother isn't an annoyance. It's like, hey, let's bring little Alfie. Ha ha ha. You know what I mean? And so I got to see all that stuff and be a part of it. And the early punk scene was really not well defined. It was just all the rejects and the misfits. You know what I mean? And not only in terms of the types of people, but also the types of music. I mean, even the look, didn't really become, kind of the standard look until more the 80s in Southern California. Earlier on, it was more just about an anything goes attitude. And, naturally, we enjoyed kind of the weird stuff in particular, like things that would oh my gosh, that was bizarre. Did you check that out? Or never that, or, and that stuck with me throughout life, and I think behind a lot of the crazy things and unusual things that I've done, both good and bad, but certainly good, I think was inspired by that attitude. For example, being basically 1 foot away from being a high school dropout to all of a sudden deciding to want to become a theoretical physicist, a mathematical physicist. I mean, anyone in their right mind, so to speak, would never think that possible or even sensible. Right. But fortunately, I believe in rules. I grew up with punk and freedom, and so that allows you to dream.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. That's man. You just that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. And here's the thing: when I was in high school, and I was one of the few punks early on. By the time I graduated, there was a lot more punks. But I would be going to school with bondage pants and a Duran Duran Rio shirt on. I would be getting crap from the long hairs for being punk and the jocks and all that. And then I'd be getting crap from the punks for my purple Rio shirt. And it was just where I wanted to be. The ultimate expression of screw you, this is who I am.
That's awesome. See, that was another thing. Duran Duran, another guilty pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
I especially love the early stuff, but man.
Fantastic.
The influences in Professor and the Madman are so much more than just punk, but yeah, I'm hearing a lot of really cool stuff. I mean, obviously the rock, and then there's Britpop on songs like Space Walrus, which is a great. It's a great track, but it's a great title too.
Sweet, yeah.
But I'm also hearing like some musical theater influences and songs like Time Machine off the new album.
Gotta throw my cell phone out. Gotta put the laptop down. Can't read another word. I'm living in crazy town. I'm gonna take the train out.
Absolutely right.
Okay, I wanted to ask if that was an influence on you, or if that was just the way the song developed.
I would say it's a bit of both.
Okay.
Both Sean and I have been influenced a lot by kind of more operatic rock. I mean, I grew up watching Tommy a bunch of times and listening to the record. Obviously, all the Beatles movies. Let's see, what else? Like Sean is a big Phantom of the Paradise fan. Paul Williams. Both Sean and I really loved the music to Jesus Christ Superstar, and that was really cool, because it was more rock, and a lot of the music from the 60s and the 70s did get very soundtrack. A lot of the Pink Floyd stuff after Barrett got, like Adam Hart Mother, got very, sounds like a soundtrack, and so we were definitely wide open to all of that. We hear this stuff in our heads as well. So it's pretty natural to be influenced by that. I think with Time Machine, that probably like a little bit more like the pop kind of musical theater, and I love musicals. I absolutely love My Fair Lady, the music from there, and a lot of those Lerner and Lowe, Rodgers and Hammerstein, there's great music there. I'm a big fan of jazz as well. I think with Time Machine, there's a musical theater aspect to it because of just the whole imagery and the story. But I think it's Paul McCartney and Brian Wilson really coming out for that song.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah. Is there a theme behind the new album?
Yeah, there is. It's not. I wouldn't say it's scripted, but there's basically an overarching story for the album.
Okay.
And every song more or less kind of slots in to give this story. The main story setting is in the first song. Well, I guess technically the second song, Seance.
Yes. Title track.
And, yeah, exactly. And the idea there, if you listen to the lyrics, is, it's basically about a group of friends who kind of, take a second and think and say, wow, we've lost a lot of family and friends. It would be really cool to get together and just, one last time say goodbye to them. So let's sort of get everyone that's around together. Let's have a seance and, give our final goodbyes.
Okay.
And, but then the seance things take a bit of a left turn.
So this is where like your Stephen King influence comes in then.
Absolutely right. And so there's this long kind of journey that goes on. So our protagonists, find themselves, for example, in hell, and that's the song 2 Tickets to the Afterlife.
Okay.
And, if you kind of dig into the vibe of the song together with the lyrics, you'll kind of realize that hell turns out to be an infernal game show. Like, the let's make a deal, come on down. We even say that in the lyrics, right? The devil is like the Bob Barker or whatever.
I can see that.
Your time with us is nearly through. Time to come on down and claim your prizes, and they can all belong to you. The only thing left to do is come down and pay.
Yeah. There's a lyric in there, a little Easter egg. I'm not sure if you caught it, but it says, what's it? It's all about. Here's Wink to tell you what it's all about. And Wink is that, the voice on one. I don't know if it's Let's Make a Deal or Price is Right.
Yes.
Wink will describe the prize.
Oh, okay.
What is his last name? Wink
Martindale.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's Wink Martindale.
Yes.
We're shouting out in there, and you can kind of tell from the album. So he spins the wheel, hits basically like Bankrupt on Wheel of Fortune or something, and they get sent to purgatory, and then the song Council of Purgatory comes in, and so there's like those are pretty more tightly and a little bit more obvious with the story. Some of them, like So Long and Real Me and stuff, are not as tightly with the story, but it hopefully sonically it does feel like you're going on a long journey. It really is meant to listen from start to finish.
It does. It's absolutely, and actually those two 2 Tickets to the Afterlife and the Council of Purgatory, 2 of my favorites on the album.
Sweet.
And I love them. They just kind of flow right with each other. It's just, they work so well together. I love it.
Right on.
And since the first album, right, you've had Paul Gray joined the band. And so how did he get involved? And then I guess the next question, and I should probably maybe let you answer one of these first, is you guys do a lot of recording remotely through file sharing and all before it kind of became de rigueur because of the pandemic. So how does that affect your playing and the song development?
That's also very, very good question. Very interesting one too. So Paul, so Rat, Sean and I had finished the first two albums, the Elixir 1 and 2, the Good Evening Sir and Election.
Yes. And
we were starting to work on the third one. And, Sean and I, when we're daydreaming, gosh, wouldn't it be fantastic to have, the Damn Black Album's rhythm section? That would just be so perfect, that we idolize those guys all our lives, love their sound, love their chemistry. We stumbled upon Rat. Then at some point, I think it was, again, probably Sean goes, you know what? We should just reach out to Paul and ask him, and so he did. He contacted him through Facebook and said, hey, Paul, what would you do with this? I'm paraphrasing now, but what would you do with this song? And he gave him Nightmare.
Okay.
And, we didn't know if he would even reply or tell us to go saw it or whatever,
right.
But he actually sent back a recorded bass track to it.
Wow.
And he said, hey, guys, this is a pretty cool song. Here's what I would do with it. And we put it up in our studio and went, oh my God, where was that the first time I released that song? And so we mixed it in and sent it back to him and said, man, this sounds pretty darn good. And he's all, yeah, it does. And he wasn't doing a whole bunch at the time. He was like doing some stuff with Captain, like Captain's playing with the Dam, but then they have the side band, the Sensible Gray Cells, which is amazing.
Okay.
But, they weren't active and touring like the Damned.
Right.
So Paul wasn't very busy, to our good fortune, which is amazing. The guy is like, one of the best bass players of a lot. And he's like, yeah, if you got some more, I'd be happy to take a look at them. And we're like, sure. And so it kind of just started like that. And I think the thing is we were kind of lucky because I think that both Rat and Paul really liked the music they were doing. If it wasn't going to interest them, they weren't going to be bothered with it, because I'm sure they get a lot of people saying, "Hey, play in my band,"
Oh yeah.
So they were very intrigued by the tunes, and so Paul joined and recorded "Disintegrate Me," the album "Disintegrate Me," and then so that was our third album. Then we went over to London to play a show at the famed 100 Club, and we recorded that and released that as a live album.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then we ended up doing Seance, of course, which brings us to the present. But the file sharing thing, that was just a big experiment. I'm not surprised it worked out so well, though, because, again, Rat and Paul are, they're really, really, really good musicians. I mean, obviously, they know how to play their instruments well, but it goes a lot deeper than that. There are people who are technically good at their instrument, but they don't have a lot of musical sense, or maybe they don't have like the right ability to channel emotion, and those guys have all that. They're so well-rounded. Even though Rat's a drummer, he knows a good melody from a bad melody.
Right.
Paul plays his bass like a lead guitarist. He knows melody and harmony, and they're professionals. So you don't need to kick them to bring emotion and feel and vibe to a recording. You don't need to have amps blasting at them,
Right, yeah.
And so the file sharing thing worked out really well because they're able to conjure the same sort of emotion and musicality when they're recording by themselves, as if we were in the room together. Okay. And Paul and Rat, unsurprisingly, play off each other really well, even though it's delayed in time through file sharing.
Right.
It's remarkable how it works. I don't think it would work with just any group of people.
I don't. So, yeah, I would agree. I mean, and kind of like we were talking about before, I've seen some people try to do things live streaming, for example.
Yeah.
you see these things posted on like a Zoom call with these four guys playing a Rush song, and it's, you know, if they did it live like that, there's just no way. Yeah, with lag and buffering, it just so it's kind of funny to see it, but it's interesting that they can make it work somehow. You know, through talent and probably file sharing, but not everybody could do it.
Yeah, that's right. So that's right.
All right, so I've got a question. I wasn't really sure how to phrase this, because I'm not sure. It's either a question you've been asked a million times, or everybody's too embarrassed to ask you this.
No problem, man.
Does math ever influence your music? Or vice versa? Do you ever get an idea of something to write about in your academic career through something musical?
You know, surprisingly, I haven't been answered that. If I've been answered that question, it's not very many times. Okay. Good for you. Yeah, this is a genuinely original question.
That's why I get paid the big bucks to podcast.
You know, at times I've thrown some concepts and terminology from math and physics into my songs. Not a whole lot with Professor and the Madman. Okay. Now, the technical process of recording music and mixing it and mastering it and all that kind of stuff, I use a lot of my understanding of math and physics to wrap my head around that, because when it comes to music, I'm completely untrained. I've never took a lesson on my instruments. I've never took a lesson in terms of how to record and mix and master music. This is all stuff that I just sort of figured out by trial and error.
Okay.
But it's helped, but especially with mixing and stuff like that, like trying to understand equalization and compression and things like that. Like my understanding of something called Fourier analysis is extremely helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's the concept of signal processing, which is all music is. It makes that concept very easy and natural once you know that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have a song about black holes or anything like that. For example, like I wrote the lyrics for Nightmare, which is going into my love of kind of, you know, Edgar Allan Poe literature. Mm-hmm. You know, that's all what that's about, obviously. Yeah. So I haven't combined those too much. I have indulged in thoughts like, you know, can I come up with a cool musical representation of pi, maybe by using the digits, you know, 3.1415, and maybe use those as either key signature changes or the number, you know, like I've thought about that just for fun, you know, if I'm waiting in line somewhere or something and bored, you know, but I've never really taken that like to heart in terms of like, I want to record and release something based on like really mixing those ideas up. But, you know, there's never say never. You just planted a seed.
maybe, you know, 20 years from now, maybe something will come of that.
That's
or maybe next album. Who knows?
Yeah.
I also read that you are an avid reader.
Yep.
And you can read in Russian and French.
Yeah.
Where do you find the time to do this stuff?
Yeah. You know, time is so oppressive.
Yeah.
Time. You know, I think I'm probably a bit more sensitive to the lack of time than most people, as far as I know, is, you know, based on people I've interacted with. And I've been like that ever since I was a kid, you know, very nervously concerned with, you know, the finiteness of time and how fast time, and it tends to accelerate as you get older, as you probably are starting to learn.
Yeah, I've got 3 teenagers. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so I try to make the best use of my time, but I'm just a human being, so I get tired and uninspired and things like that. But I got interested in languages as, you know, when I was in graduate school, especially. I mean, you know, I took French in high school and, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, you have to pick a language. My mom was fluent in Spanish. You know, that was the Mexican side of the family. And when I got into graduate school, you had in the sciences, at least at that time, you had to test out in a language. You had to basically be able to read the scientific literature in either French, German, or Russian. And so I tested out in German, taught myself some German and tested out in German. But I was also studying Russian because I just really thought it was a neat language. I liked the cool letters that,
Yeah, the Cyrillic alphabet and all this.
Yeah,
crazy.
And it has a real, it's real pleasant to my ear too. It sounds like, like German is famous for being a little harsh.
Yeah.
French is famous for being a little sloppy, soft, almost like the opposite of German.
Right.
Russian kind of fits really nicely in between. It's pleasant sounding, but not too, mushy.
I never thought of that. Wow. Another thing that I've never realized.
It's pretty nice. And I also read tons and tons of Russian literature because some of their authors are fantastic.
Yeah.
Dostoevsky, Gogol, Solzhenitsyn, Tolstoy, just amazing writers that can get quite deep and philosophical.
Oh, yeah.
And at the same time, just they build these big worlds with, huge numbers of characters. And, War and Peace is famous for being super long and involved.
Yes.
And, and their classical composers were really remarkable. I absolutely love, Tchaikovsky. I mean, just some amazing stuff there. And when I get interested in a culture like that, I think, to really kind of try to get yourself in there, I think understanding the language a little bit is helpful. So I started teaching myself Russian and reading some, and also in my research, I've read papers in French, Russian, and German because they weren't translated to English.
Wow.
And I'm not fluent, don't get me wrong. I can't sit here and start having a full-on conversation German with you.
Right.
But I can slowly but surely read and interpret stuff, but verbal conversations I wouldn't be quite so good at when people are talking, fluent people are talking at their normal speed.
Yeah.
So I read. I'm good with reading. I just recently read Alexandre Dumas, A History of Revenge, or I think in English they call it Count of Monte Cristo.
Yes.
I just read French, just was fantastic. Because I kind of haven't worked on my French in a long time, and so that was really fun. So yeah,
awesome.
I got into languages, and I picked up Spanish from my mom, and also just from growing up in Southern California. There's a lot of it around.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, I know you guys can't do it now, but our Professor and the Madman, are you guys touring a lot pre-pandemic and maybe hopefully post-pandemic? Do you guys tour very much at all?
No, we don't actually. We don't do much live stuff. Part of that is because I think Sean and I both prefer the studio.
Mm-hmm.
We like doing live too. I know I do. I think Sean, it's kind of bittersweet live for him. I think he likes to do it, but it's exhausting as well. But we both absolutely love the studio. If someone would pay us our salaries to work in the studio, 80 hours a week, we would do it and be. But we do like, if what it is, I think with Sean, and I completely agree with him on this. The conditions for live shows matters, especially when you're 50 and not 15.
Yeah.
Playing at a little bar and you're trying to play sophisticated music on a shitty little sound system, and if you're playing to an audience that doesn't get it, or if they're expecting to see DI,
True.
I mean, and I would love to play DI songs. It's again, I love the punk, I love the DI, I love those, but I don't necessarily want to play DI songs during a Pat M set.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
and you guys have careers.
Yeah. It's so if, playing a large show on a good sound system, larger venues with the right band supporting you, or you're supporting the right bands, we should never play with DI in a show. That too different. Right. We should be playing, I would say the most punk of a band I think Pat M should be playing with is The Damned, because our music's a little bit more emotional and intellectual. It's a little bit more sort of diverse, and so you don't want to annoy people with your music.
Exactly. You want people to come to the show and appreciate it.
Yeah, and to do Pat M live is sophisticated. You need good sound, or it's going to just get, all the important ingredients are going to get missing. So we're pretty picky. We're pretty picky about the shows we do. And so we've done some shows. We've done some live shows with a U.S. lineup.
Okay.
Prior to the pandemic. And then, of course, we did it with the full lineup. We did shows back in 2018 in the UK. And then the pandemic hit. But, everyone's getting itchy feet, getting tired of being at home. So we're, the Damned is looking to go on tour with the original lineup.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And next summer. And so we could hopefully get going and do some of that as well. But it depends whether Rat's going to be available because, of course, Rat was in the original Damned lineup. So he might be busy, but I think, Paul, Sean, and I certainly are eager to get out and play again next summer if COVID will let us.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the DC area, man. If Damned or Panem comes by, I gotta be there because I love the music. You got a new fan in me because it's just
awesome.
I love the diverse amount of influence you guys put into the music, and the fact that you can combine multiple into a single song is. I really want to see you guys do that live.
That would be awesome, man. We would love to play for you, and it's so gratifying when people kind of get it. You know what I mean? When they listen to it and get it. I mean, the way you're explaining a lot of these things, I mean, I wouldn't explain it any better. I mean, you really are getting it. And when I was, you bet. And I mean, still when I listen to other bands, I mean, I listen to other music as well, but certainly when I was growing up and acquiring all my musical influences, I mean, that's kind of what excited me about the music. I was listening to Ziggy Stardust album and brain was getting blown away. Brain Salad Surgery by ELP, Sgt. Pepper's, Pet Sounds, and, I wouldn't say I studied it exactly like a scientist, but I did kind of study. I listened to it over and over, and I thought about it. I let my imagination run, and I listened for new things every time I heard it. And the bands that I really liked were the ones that rewarded me for that.
Right.
Sonic, Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Well, where can people find the album? How can they pick up the new album, Seance?
We have a website, professorandthemadman.com, that we're selling through there. We also have a Bandcamp page. It was either bandcamp.professorandthemadman.com or vice versa, professorandthemadman.bandcamp. Right. But if you go to bandcamp.com and just search for Professor and the Madman, you'll find us. I think the main thing, kind of going back to what we were talking about on the name of the band, the one downside to the name of the band is because of the Mel Gibson movie, it's hard to find us on the internet because you're going to get 100 hits on the Mel Gibson movie before you get our band. And so what I suggest to people is, don't just search Professor and the Madman, search for Professor and the Madman Band.
Right.
And that will help a little bit, not perfectly, but we have a Facebook page, and we're on social media, Twitter, all that good stuff. So certainly people can contact us there.
Excellent.
Also Apple Music, or I guess Apple Music, iTunes, same thing, or something.
Yeah, they're changing. I think they're dropping iTunes at some point, and
they're going just Apple Music now, maybe.
I think so, because they're doing the same thing with podcasts. It's Apple Podcasts now, so it's just I don't know. I don't know why they got to change things so often.
Yeah,
so Amazon, often. Once every 20 years, I guess that's not too bad.
Right. Yeah. We sell our stuff on Amazon as well. I think the CDs and the digital downloads are already for sale on Amazon, and the vinyl is showing up probably within a couple weeks. We got some real cool purple and yellow vinyl.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome for all the vinyl hounds.
Something else I got to tell you, actually, we've again just in true crazy Professor and the Madman form. We have another product that we released with Seance just to be crazy, and we have a board game.
A board game.
We made and released a board game.
Wow.
So there's Seance board game, and we even made a commercial for it, which is a total play on the 60s or 70s commercials, like you might have seen for the Twister, game or something.
Oh yeah, that, Milton Bradley
music, and
that's awesome.
So we've sold quite a bit of those. Those have been a hit.
Oh, is that on Bandcamp too, or is that just on the website?
It's on the website for sure. I don't know if it's on Bandcamp.
All right, I gotta look at that. My family, we play all kinds of board games, so I gotta check that out.
Yeah. And it's cool because it's kind of, we're not Milton Bradley or the Parker, but, we kind of took the Monopoly kind of idea and, but instead of like Boardwalk and Park Place, it's all these old punk venues from the early days.
Oh, wow.
100 Club, like the Whiskey A Go-Go, like, so those are the,
That's awesome.
Yeah, instead of going jail, you go to the morgue. It's a fun homage to our punk background, So you got to have a punk Monopoly, don't you?
Yes. I mean, they make it for so many other things at this point. You got to have one for punk.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for joining me. I've had so much fun talking with you.
Me too, man. Me too.
I appreciate it. To be honest, after reading some of the works you published, I was a little intimidated. I'm like, how the hell am I going to talk to this guy about music when he's discussing the twistor structure of biquaternionic projective point advances in applied Clifford algebras? I can't even get that out in one breath. Oh my gosh. But it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Mark. My pleasure.